Yeah, I will tell you more about the Nagoya Protocol, and Dominic, thank you for paving the way. I think some of the aspects that I will touch down you already said, but maybe it's good to hear it 2 times. I'm actually giving this presentation to you on behalf of one of our legal people in Switzerland that asked me, as I'm in South Africa, to give it to you. Okay, the R&D material in the ornamental and fruit sector was until 1993 regarded as free access. And then, as said, the CBD changed this perception by confirming that these resources lie under the territorial sovereignty of individual countries. Each country has the right, according to the CBD, over its own natural resources. And then, as a result of this, they have the authority to determine the access to the genetic resources under national legislation. The CBD became the first international instrument to acknowledge the sovereign right of the countries and how to regulate and to control these rights. And they also established the principle of benefit sharing. So, well, what is genetic resources? I wouldn't go into that as well. You've heard that. So there's some definitions. But something that I just want to say is that these resources can be wild resources. It can be something from the habitat, from the ecosystem. It can be domesticated, but it can also be cultivated. And saying this is where indigenous knowledge come in. This is where the biodiversity acts come in. So there's a lot of laws of different countries that play a role as a result of these broad definitions. So a little bit more information on the Nagoya Protocol. It's supplementary to the CBD, and it specifically focuses in on access and benefit sharing. It defined the definitions that we've just heard about, and then something that's added on that is the monitoring and compliance of the laws of both all the parties, the country where the material comes from, as well as the country that used the material. So it basically stipulates the regulatory way of access and benefit between all of these countries, and both, or in sometimes 2 or 3 of these countries' laws play a role. The latest map that I got from the website basically show in purple, look more blue for me. But yeah, it's the parties. It seems like at the moment it's 114 parties, and there's 105 signatures. You would also see that there's some countries that's a signature, but they did not ratify. And then there's a light gray and a dark gray. The light gray is non-CBD and non-signature countries, and the dark one is CBD but not signature. So there's quite a lot of array of countries in the world, but a large portion of this is part of the protocol. So yeah, before the Nagoya Protocol, where's the light? Which one is the light? Any kind of biological research material could be used in the R&D chain, and it could be sold in another country. There was some IP laws and the laws of the CBD, but the specific access and benefit sharing was not part of this. But then the Nagoya Protocol happened, and the free access wasn't there anymore. So what were added now is What were added now is the contracts that need to be signed between the governments. Whenever someone planned to use the genetic resources, they had to seek consent from the country of origin before they can access the genetic material. And as I said, the country of origin's law is important there, and it needs to be followed. And the prior informed consent need to be disclosed. And the other one is the mutual agreed terms that basically say that there need to be a negotiation between the two or the countries involved, and they need to make sure that whatever benefit is agreed on is on paper, because there will be an audit process later on, and that can be some restriction. It can be a time restriction, or it can be a restriction just on some of the activities. Just a little bit more information of this. The PIC is granted by the provider to the user in line with the national laws, and the MAT needs to be developed between both of them. So the prior informed consent is more from the first country, the country that the material is assessed from, where the MAT, as you say, it's mutual agreed, so it's the countries coming together and decide what is the benefit and what will be best for us. And then in some cases, the benefit sharing can be monetary or non-monetary. So that's now the contracts and the benefit sharing that play a role. But then the countries went further. And as I say, another thing that also added on is a compliance audit. Most of the countries are thinking of doing it, and some already do that. So that actually means that when, let's say, material from South Africa go to the Netherlands will audit the research facility to make sure that they have the contracts, that they have proof of everything that happened, and they have all the legal documentation, the import permits, the export permits. So this is a compliance aspect. And then some countries like the EU and Korea, they also add on a due diligence declaration that basically is an added on thing, but it's only a few countries, according to my knowledge, that have this. Okay, sorry. But there's a lot of space for interpretation. This is now a protocol with some suggestions and rules and regulations, but each country can decide on its own how to interpret this, and this creates actually more problems than not. So the countries differ a lot in the interpretation. They have different laws that play a role, and the regulation of that. Some countries have stricter regulation, some not. Some countries like Brazil, for instance, also now regulate the digital sequence information. And this is also part of the treaty that I think some of you are involved, and a lot of countries are arguing against that. And then we have countries like India. You also mentioned India. India also regulate the commercial seed varieties, and then in India it's seen as a criminal act, so if you don't comply they can throw you in the jail. So some easy, some much more difficult. Just some examples. This example is between India and the Dutch market, a flower variety in the Indian market that need to be or wanted to be bred and then commercialized on the Dutch market. What's important again is the different countries. India is the source or the access country, so all the biodiversity authority need to be approached, the laws in India need to be understood. As I say, commercial seed varieties are regulated in India under the law. The conditions of the contracts need to be negotiated, and research content need to be disclosed. And then the India authority need to approve this. And then on the Dutch side, there will be a compliance audit, and the Dutch authority will also assess the contracts. And because of Netherlands being part of the EU, there will be a due diligence declaration. And then benefit sharing will be negotiated, and India, one of the countries that like the financial part. So another example, bringing it closer to, home, to South Africa, is that if there's access from South Africa for program in Netherlands, but commercialization in the EU and in Switzerland, we now have basically 4 rules. So firstly will be South Africa. So we look into the biodiversity authority will be approached. The ABS laws need to be understood. South Africa have some indigenous knowledge laws, and they have Biodiversity Act. So all of that will have to be looked into to make sure that pelargonium is not part of that. Contracts will be negotiated. There will be an international certificate of compliance, and then, export of the seed. In the Netherlands, the Dutch authority will audit the breeding station. Because the EU is involved, there will be a due diligence declaration, and Switzerland is also part, of the EU, so it will also be due diligence in Switzerland, and then benefit sharing. So in conclusion, the protocol has been ratified, and it's implemented on national level. It's existing, it's in force, and we need to comply. If we don't want to comply, we must advocate against that. There's 3 things that I want to summarize in actions to remember, is that firstly, understand the legal requirements of the origin country before you start to negotiate, and make sure that you get your permission of assess before you start working with the breeding material, and then have the proof. So if there's an audit, or if the inspector, don't know if the government inspection might be involved in this, if they need to audit you, you need to have the proof for this. So this is in a nutshell the Nagoya Protocol. Thank you for your attention.